Larry, welcome back to the show. You know, a lot of people are wondering if Donald Trump has just sold out the American taxpayer by signing this COVID relief bill, leaving everybody with only $600. You say something else, right?
First of all, with regard to him signing it, he had no choice in that regard. I don't blame him for that because his veto would have been overridden. It would have been overridden because they would have gotten at least 60 votes in the Senate. The Republicans are overwhelmingly for it. This bill is going to cost the Republicans the election in Georgia. Of course, they do a good job on their own, frankly. And the Democrats already have millions of ballots out in the mail. So here's my latest prediction. I say it's 50-50, is that the Republicans will lose both seats in Georgia, and the Democrats and the left will take complete control of our so-called government, which of course is no government at all. They don't represent the people. So that's the segue into why I want to talk today, Jason, because I want people to understand something, is that why is it that the American taxpayer even has to pay $600, take $600 out of his or her pocket, and then put it back into his pocket? It's going to be raised through taxes and everything else. Previous trillion-dollar bailouts before this, yet no one, including the president in our government, seeks to hold communist China accountable. You know, the Chinese are good people, but communist China is evil.
Wait, small correction, Larry. There is one man who seeks to hold communist China accountable. His name is Larry Klayman.
That's me. Yeah, right. You're right. And it's a disgrace that Larry Klayman and Freedom Watch had to bring a class action lawsuit in Dallas, Texas, and Jerusalem, Israel, and a criminal complaint in The Hague. Because where is our government? Our government could have frozen all of these Chinese assets, used it to pay for the damage that has been done to our health, to our finances, to our businesses, to our emotional well-being. But instead, the president has played games, as he played games with the radical leftists that were running through the streets. When he said, you mayors and governors, you have to take care of it. He did that for political reasons. He wanted the country to have a backlash against them. But with regard to China, you have to ask yourself this question. What do the Chinese have on Trump that he's not willing to take a strong stand? Because frankly, saying it's the Kung flu is not enough. Putting on a few tariffs is not enough. These people have destroyed this country. They've destroyed the world. The Europeans, they're cowards to begin with. They never do anything. And of course, I've got a case at the International Criminal Court. We haven't heard from them after they said they were processing it. But why is it that our own government is doing something? And then you have these clowns on Capitol Hill, like Senator Tom Cotton, running around auditioning to run for president in 4 years, talking about how bad China is. Lindsey Graham, Tucker Carlson, you know, on Fox, everybody else. But no one does anything. And we have to pay the price. And things are continuing to get worse and worse and worse, to the point that people can't continue to live any normal lives. I've talked to my doctors. I've got some very good doctors. And Judy Mikovits, my client, who is an expert in virology. This thing's not going to be over for years. And if you think that these vaccines are safe, watch my show last week on Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. It's up at freedomwatchusa.org. In particular, Judy pointed out, African Americans and Hispanics are particularly vulnerable. There are subsegments of that population that can die from this virus more easily than with Caucasians.
So why is that, Larry? I'm going to have to listen to that episode of Special Prosecutor because it seems like that's what they've been saying in the mainstream, but I've been looking all around for evidence that supports that, and it's been hard to find. I'm very interested in what Dr. Mikovits said.
COVID is likely to kill them quicker. She said the vaccines are likely.
Oh, the vaccine.
The vaccine, yes.
Whoa.
And it's very complex. I asked people to listen to it. I'm not the one to really, say it one way or the other. I'm not an expert in that regard. But these vaccines are extremely dangerous. And they've also been covering up a lot of the various serious side effects that are involved. But that being said, the biggest issue is, and this is where, although I praise President Trump for many good things that he did in the last 4 years, I want to know why he's not manning up with regard to China. I want to know what the Chinese may have on him. We know what they've got on Biden, and we know what we can expect when Biden becomes president. And make no mistake about it, he's going to be president, unfortunately, despite the massive fraud. And so will that evil witch, pathological liar, Kamala Harris. And this country is going to be in very, very serious trouble, which is why I wrote this book. It takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry, which you can get at Amazon.com, because we have to rise up now. We don't have anybody protecting us. Forget about Trump. He's gone. He's history. Okay, he may be a good mouthpiece in the future. Maybe he buys a cable station. Hopefully he'll put Fox out of business. Hopefully he'll put Newsmax out of business, who's now selling itself as the pro-Trump network. Christopher Ruddy, the CEO, gave $1 million to the Clinton Foundation, is the Trump News Network, if you can believe that. And expect that when Biden becomes president, he'll try to cozy up to Biden too, in all likelihood. So Trump can be very helpful as to allow conservatives and people in faith of others to have a real voice, to have an unfiltered voice where you can say what you believe, and you don't have to say what's politically correct, try to get on Fox News or Newsmax. But do not count on it. We have to count on ourselves now. And we're out there by ourselves, we're hanging by a thread, and we face the prospect of a total leftist, radical leftist takeover.
Yeah. And I just want to remind everybody, Larry, when you're talking about a revolution, you mean a legal revolution and the people taking the justice system into their own hands, as you have with the citizens' grand juries and the various things that you're doing. People can support that at freedomwatchusa.org. We did a citizens' grand jury indicting Robert Mueller. And I mean, every time we talk about this, Larry, there's some genius who tells me it's not a real thing. It absolutely is a real thing. It allows us to generate sworn affidavits and legal testimony from witnesses and things that, the issue is getting somebody to actually enforce the judgments, but it is a legal process, and I commend you for going through it and educating everybody about it.
We have to try that, Jason, before we try other measures, okay? And like I said, it's not you or me who's going to be advocating a violent, bloody revolution. And as I said in my book, and as I've said before on this show, Jefferson predicted a violent, bloody revolution every 20 years or so, primarily because federal judges would not stand in the stead for the American people because they're unelected and unaccountable. And we can see what they've done to the president. They threw him under the bus, including his own Supreme Court appointees. It's a disgrace. So yes, we have to be prepared for that. But whoever is the genius, quote unquote, who says that citizens' grand juries are not legal was what our founding fathers did in 1776 legal? It was not legal. They defied the orders of King George III. They said, we do not recognize them. We are forming our own government by and for the people with equal rights for everyone in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Right now, we don't have a government. And this bill that was just passed is an example of that. It's a mockery of a travesty, the sham of a mockery of a travesty is what he outrages. It's a joke. $600 per person, which is coming out of our pocket in any event. It's not like it's a freebie. What are people going to do? Most people are probably going to go out and buy a color TV. They'll buy a 65-inch color TV. You can get one for $600. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything, frankly. And you can watch the TV as you're dying from COVID-19.
I one time fairly recently tried to locate a black and white TV, and I don't think you can get them anymore. So all TVs are color TVs. But there is, I have to tell you, Larry, there's a lot of people. Was that? Yeah, a little bit. It's okay. A lot of people in our chat, Larry, are respectfully disagreeing. Trump hasn't given up yet, and I appreciate your point of view. Charles Ortel had tweeted earlier today that Trump invoked this Impoundment Control Act of 1974 at the time that he signed the COVID bill. And in my conversations with Charles today, he's telling me that this bill allows Trump to sort of selectively redline elements of the bill. You don't see any possibility that this could be?
No, this is why. Because that's a line item veto. That's what that's called. Okay, that was something that Ronald Reagan advocated, President Reagan. But that can be overridden with 60 votes in the Senate. They've got 60 votes. The Republicans have the 60 along with the Democrats. And so it's going nowhere, frankly, going nowhere. Oh. And that's why the president signed it. He had no choice. He couldn't have vetoed it. He couldn't have blocked it. So he bluffed. And it was good that he tried the bluff, but it didn't work. But the bigger question is, where is he with the communist Chinese? Where is he? his fat blowhard Attorney General, Bill Barr, could have certainly intervened in our case and given it a lot more weight in Dallas with the Trump judge that we've got, who's so far, shows a lack of courage, which is not unusual for the Trump judges, frankly. We see who they are. They're basically partisan political Republican hacks. Every single one of them I appeared in front of so far have proved to be that way. And I write about that in my book, where I say in French, the more things change, the more they remain the same. The president didn't know who he appointed. Now, the president was well-intentioned, but now they stabbed him on the back. And it wasn't just Amy Coney Barrett and Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. It was his lower court judges, too, who also turned their back on him. So, in fact, just yesterday, he tweeted, the courts are corrupt, and they are corrupt. And the legal profession is the most corrupt profession in this country. I became the anti-lawyer when I started Judicial Watch in 1994. And now, of course, I started Freedom Watch and run that. But this is what we're dealing with. So for those people to say, well, let's do everything the way it's always been done. I always used to hear that in government. Right. I was working in the Justice Department from my chief. Let's try this, Mr. McConaughey. Oh, no, we can't do that. We've never done it before. I said, well, that doesn't mean you can't do it. And this is the mentality, is that, we can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and failing. What's that famous expression? The real stupidity, I forget.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result.
Exactly. That's it, Jason. And, this country right now, we've got Joe Biden, brain dead Joe Biden, who will be dead within 6 months. Mark my words, either by natural causes or they'll give him something and he doesn't wake up. Then we've got Kamala Harris. And in through the door of the White House and every other house, shall we say outhouse in Washington, become these radical leftists that are bent on dismantling this country, dividing it up, paying reparations to everyone. Hey, I want my piece of the pie. I'm Jewish. I helped build the pyramids. Maybe I can get something too.
Call Egypt.
Right. Let's call Egypt.
Right.
And, so this is the problem here. And if American people don't recognize this, that we've got to go outside of the system, that we don't have a government, that we have to set up our own government in effect. And that's the next step. I hope that we can do after these citizens' grand juries and indict Comey and McCabe and Clapper and the Brennans and the Obamas and the Clintons and, of course, the Bidens. We're going to be doing that right after the new year for their crimes. But I think we need to declare a new government and maybe set it up in Philadelphia, where it all began at Independence Hall, and tell the leftists in Philadelphia they got 24 hours to get out of town, because we're now in control. The American people are in control. And if the government doesn't like it, come and get us.
Let me take you back to an important point that you made, because I agree with you. There's a really disturbing amount of corruption within the legal profession. I just got into a dust-up a lot of people saw. I want to take you back to Newsmax for a second with noted attorney Alan Dershowitz. And he wrote this column for Newsmax, "Believe science, but be skeptical of scientists." This is idiotic, Larry, to have a lawyer, no offense, writing a column about medical science. Alan Dershowitz has now publicly lied about me. And in this article, he talks about how masks work. He doesn't cite any kind of clinical trial, placebo, backed kind of research. And ironically, earlier today, the World Health Organization had a really pretty big press conference. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. I presume you didn't. I know you're extremely busy. Can I play just a segment of this for you, Larry?
I'll go, and I think it'll still be all Trump all the time. Oops. But will it work?
Oh, wait a minute. We got somebody talking there who we don't want talking. Well, basically what happened is we've got a question being posed to, here we go. Let's turn this off. It's so difficult to run a show all by myself. This is the
Thank you. And others might
chief scientist for the World Health Organization.
But I think that's a really important question. And I think, Latika, what we're learning now, and we continue to wait for more results from the vaccine trials, is to really understand if these vaccines, apart from preventing symptomatic disease and severe disease and deaths, whether they're also going to reduce infections. or prevent people from getting infected with the virus, prevent them from passing it on or transmitting it to other people. At the moment, I don't believe we have the evidence on any of the vaccines to be confident that it's going to prevent people from actually getting the infection and therefore being able to pass it on. So I think till we know more, we need to assume that people who have been vaccinated also need to take the same precautions.
So that's an interesting statement from the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. She basically backed up what I said, which is how the CDC defined a vaccine. She said it's not yet known if it will prevent infection and therefore spreading it. So Alan Dershowitz is saying all these things. He's really trying to create these laws that have no basis in medical science to force people to get this vaccine.
Well, I don't know the particulars, Jason, but I'll tell you something. From the surface, the woman seems to make a lot of sense, except what she also says is continue to wear the masks. And I don't think the masks are productive either, because we're not able to develop that immunity naturally, the herd immunity, the so-called herd immunity. And that's
you mean if you're wearing the mask, you're not able to develop.
If you're wearing the mask, this has prolonged everything.
Right.
And it's made it worse. In the meantime, the virus has mutated to the point, and it's going to mutate several more times. Listen to this radio show with Dr. Mikovits at freedomwatchusa.org of last week. It was called, it was about Jesus and it was about religion. That's the title of it, okay, in terms of how we better turn to God right now, and the Father. But listen to that, because Judy has been saying from day one that these masks are counterproductive, that they won't stop the virus and are not allowing us to acquire a natural immunity. And that appears to be the case. But in terms of her other interpretation, I think she's right, is that we don't know whether these things work or not. And I believe that they're also covering up a lot of the severe side effects. And it was ironic the other day, watching the first person to get this, an African-American woman in New York, sitting in a chair, looking like it was old Sparky, the electric chair in Florida. It was a weird scene. Yeah. And when African-Americans apparently are more vulnerable to severe reactions to this vaccine and can die, according to Dr. Mikovits.
Wow.
It reminds me of what happened in Tuskegee when we started, experimenting on African-Americans with syphilis. I mean, why? They thought they were doing it because they don't want to be called racist. Give it to the African-American first. In fact, they may actually be doing harm to the African-American by grandstanding this for political purposes with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's very strange to me to have the governor basically pass an executive order making it illegal for doctors to prescribe hydroxychloroquine, a drug which, prior to the controversy introduced by Donald Trump, lauding it, is something that's been prescribed around the world for literally decades. And now we've got the governor, who's a JD, a Juris Doctorate, not a medical doctor. He put out an order that doctors aren't even allowed to prescribe it, but he wants to mandate this experimental preventative measure that the World Health Organization itself says we don't have a sufficient amount of evidence about.
I give Cuomo credit for being a good speaker. His dad's a good speaker. His brother, Chris Cuomo, is a good speaker, but that's where it ends. Okay. Otherwise they're all frauds. And
he's an Emmy Award winner, Larry.
Did you remember what Bill Clinton said to my client, Jennifer Flowers, on the famous tape that was leaked right after Clinton declared for the presidency? Obviously Clinton was having an affair with Jennifer, and he referred to Mario Cuomo, the dad, as mafia. That created a big issue at the time. And I don't know whether they're mafia or not, but I do know this: Andrew Cuomo is corrupt. And when his dad was governor, he was profiting off of his dad while he was Attorney General of New York. He's just really one corrupt dude.
Huh. That seems to be the way it goes, right? You have somebody in the family basically get the cash, and then you can claim, I didn't receive any money from China or anybody like that.
Look, Biden is the perfect example of that. And here's the irony with that, Jason. I think that this Chinese scandal, they'll never impeach, and nobody ever gets impeached and convicted in this country in 244 years. That's a joke. That's one of the things we got to change in our Constitution. We got to change that aspect of it. But the other thing is, nobody will ever indict him either, because Biden and Harris will be in control of the Justice Department. However, I think the heat in the kitchen is going to get so great that he may have a stroke just in terms of what's going to happen with regard to the humiliation and the heat in the kitchen with regard to him and his son and his brother. And I think that may actually bring on maybe earlier Alzheimer's, or he may die as a result. And then we get Kamala Harris. So beat up on Biden and you wind up with Kamala Harris. That's the irony. And, Victor David Hanson, who Fox uses as the guru for everything. I mean, he's the world's expert on everything. But I think he's right about this, is that the Democrat left is going to be the one that's going to go after Biden even more than the worthless Republican cowards in Congress. They want to get rid of Biden. And now that he's served the purpose, he was the Manchurian candidate. He's outlived his usefulness, and they want Kamala Harris in there because she's a radical leftist, just like they are.
I mean, it doesn't really matter, though, right? If they control Biden, they control the office of the presidency, they can get whatever they want done.
Well, maybe they'll just blackmail him if he survives, say, hey, we've got this on you too. Remember Hillary Clinton, the 900 FBI files she got? Mm-hmm. Well, she even got an FBI file on James Carville, who was her own political advisor, and bills. So that was an insurance policy. These people were going to stay in line and not turn against them. Let me add one other thing that you just mentioned with regard to people who still hold out hope that the president hasn't given up. No, the president hasn't given up. What I'm saying is that given the dynamics in our corrupt government, our totally corrupt government, let me say it again, totally corrupt top to bottom, there is zero chance that he will be the next president of the United States. His own party won't stand up for him. We just got a handful of people in the House of Representatives that will stand up for him. That's not going to do it. The courts have abandoned him. He's out there on his own. And I've said it over and over again. If he's serious, and if he has evidence of widespread massive fraud or can get it, then he should declare martial law, freeze things, and call for new, free, and fair elections. We're in a crisis. Abraham Lincoln used that power when we were in a crisis. We're not at war with the South right now. We're at war with the left. So use the power that you have, your president. And if I may be a little crass, put up or shut up. Do it or don't do it. Otherwise, go off to Mar-a-Lago, because you're not going to be president unless you do it.
He's been getting criticized for that, going to Mar-a-Lago to play golf while everybody was waiting for the answer to this bill. It's a little confusing.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, look, he deserves, to have a little bit of time to air out. I don't begrudge him.
Playing golf on a Saturday, the guy needs a day off from work.
Yeah, and they said, he's played 300 times in 4 years. Frankly, that's not a lot. Okay, it's not a lot. So he goes out there. When I go to play golf, I go out in the morning sometimes, and I'm thinking, what I can be doing. My head is clear. The air is fresh. It's a good recreation. Frankly, it's the only thing you can do these days with regard to COVID. It's the only golf industry is going through the roof. People are investing in it because it's the only thing you can do.
Tell me if you share this feeling, Larry. People like you and I who are working for themselves and dealing with complicated problems, you're kind of working all the time. As you said, when you're on the golf course, you're thinking, you might have an epiphany when you get out of the office. But there's a couple things about this that are confusing, because they're saying the House now passed a bill for $2,000 and they're leaving it up to the Republicans. So what's going on? I mean, is this old news already? I mean, this is from...
No, look, the Democrats are evil. I mean, they're the party of the devil, but no one said the devil was stupid. He's not stupid. And what they're doing is throwing it back to the Republican Senate. So the Republicans can vote it down. They will then use that as an issue in Georgia to win the 2 seats and take control of the entire legislative branch, executive branch, and frankly, they're still in control of the judicial branch because there's more Clinton and Obama judges, and the ones that were appointed by Trump are worthless. So they'll have a total control of this government.
And, you bring up Georgia. A lot of people are talking about this explosion that occurred at the AT&T building there in Tennessee. I know that you have done a lot of work with the NSA, the illegal spying and all that. And this AT&T building is apparently a hub of some kind for the NSA. Have you heard much about this story, Larry? Have you been following this?
Well, we know that going way back when, that all of the telephone companies were running interference for the NSA. They were all in bed with the NSA. They were charging exorbitant rates to the government in exchange for allowing the NSA to do its dirty work, and we know that.
Have you seen this piece of surveillance video, Larry? This is a security camera of some kind that captured the explosion. It's particularly interesting because a lot of people have been talking about, just take a look in this area of the screen, right by the building that explodes, this third light tower. I'm going to step through slowly. We can see, do you see this? Looks like a line of smoke here. So people have speculated that that is an energy beam of some kind. The thing that's interesting is, I agree with that, because when we look at this video footage from a security camera, there's a factor that a lot of people haven't spoken about yet. You know, our eyes are sensitive to Roy G. Biv, right? The visible spectrum of light, red, green, you know, that whole spectrum there. But outside the visible spectrum of light, we've got infrared and ultraviolet. And I don't know if you can see this on the screen share, but there's this sort of bloom of light that appears around that beam when it is shot down that I believe, Larry, is light energy being reflected from a laser or some sort of energy beam being shot from a plane or a satellite or something above. And the digital sensor in a camera is going to be sensitive to light energy beyond the Roy G. Biv visible spectrum of light. And it makes sense that it would see light energy surrounding that kind of a laser beam. Have you seen this footage before?
No, I haven't. Very interesting. But, you know, AT&T, I helped break up AT&T when I was a Justice Department lawyer back during the Reagan administration. It was a very corrupt company. They were cooking their tariffs to overcharge the American people, which is what led to the antitrust lawsuit. And not just that, not just with regard to services, but also with regard to equipment. They had a total monopoly, and we broke it up. So they are a force today. They're back. They also own DirecTV. They own many other things, and they're a government in and of themselves. And yes, our intelligence agencies do use them to do their dirty work. And that's why when AT&T and these other telephone companies would overcharge our government, and our government would pay these exorbitant rates that were even more than what consumers were paying for the same service, cell phone and everything else. Well, what did they get as a quid pro quo? They had to do the dirty work of the NSA and the intelligence agencies to get that money. So there is this little cabal between the telecommunications sector and our government, and they collaborated. Verizon was the same way, obviously. Verizon was, of course, it was Snowden that lifted the veil on what was going on with Verizon and the mass surveillance of the American people. That's why I brought a lawsuit. I was a Verizon customer, and my clients were, and we succeeded in getting 2 preliminary injunctions against this mass surveillance. But then, of course, I think they got dirt on the judge. The judge freaked out, and I had a whistleblower that said he was being surveilled too, and he wouldn't let the case go forward. So they're very, very powerful. The intelligence agencies are more powerful than the President of the United States.
And, you know, when we observe something like that piece of evidence that we just looked at, maybe I'm going out on a limb here, but as far as digital photography, digital imaging, special effects, would I qualify as an expert witness in a lawsuit, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, you are an expert, Jason.
In those fields,
by the way, is a technological genius. And when we do our citizens' grand juries, we're going to have grand jurors in many different states all at once up on the screen by Zoom or, Skype or whatever. And we're going to do a virtual citizens grand jury. Hey, if it's good enough for these judges who don't want to show up to court, then it's good enough for us.
That's right. And I appreciate the compliment, of course. What I was trying to get at is, I'm not just making some wild statement. I've analyzed that video footage, and I do believe what we are seeing is some sort of a laser weapon that hits the building the instant before it explodes. And people who say, that's a conspiracy theory, lasers and space stuff, that's crazy. But, Wikipedia tells us Boeing has something called the YAL-1, an airborne laser test bed. It's a weapons system and it was a megawatt class chemical oxygen iodine laser mounted inside a modified 747-400. So this thing could fly over the AT&T building, shoot a laser at it, blow it up, blame it on an RV.
Jason, that's been a technological certainty for many, many years. I had a case going back at Judicial Watch for Lieutenant Commander Jack Daly of the Navy, who was flying a mission over Puget Sound with a Canadian Joint American mission, surveilling, watching, spying on Russian trawlers who were spying on our submarine fleet there. That's where we have our nuclear submarine fleet. He was hit with a laser by that Russian trawler. I ultimately sued the Russian trawler company, and I got a judge, an ultra-leftist judge, who actually invited Russian judges into the courtroom in front of the jury and, infected the jury with prejudice. It was unbelievable. But in any event, yeah, that technology has existed for a very long time. And that's gone back, to the 1990s.
Wow. And yeah, I mean, we see Russians have laser weapons. The United States has laser weapons. I just think that in general, the public hasn't really seen these sort of things outside of movies. So any kind of comment that a laser weapon, it seems far-fetched, but something's going on there in Tennessee. A lot of people, Larry, have said that perhaps destroying that AT&T building might have some kind of impact on various efforts that the president and his legal team are making to gather evidence, et cetera.
Well, it's interesting. The suicide bomber, if that's what he was, this guy, Anthony Quinn Warner, okay, he didn't want to kill anybody. He just wanted to take out the building, apparently, and he wanted to kill himself for whatever reason. But it's very curious. We'll never find out what happened here. This will be like Las Vegas with Paddock. It'll be covered up. And you're probably right. The government, our so-called government, I can't call it a government anymore, Jason. Our so-called government is probably involved in some way.
Well, it's interesting, Larry, and we're going to stay on it. And you mentioned Las Vegas. You were kind enough to join us on John Cullen Investigates a couple of weeks ago. John's done the best work investigating the Las Vegas shooting of anybody that I know. Haven't had a chance to speak to him about this yet, but it is interesting. They always seem to have these lone nuts who are very upset about either Marxism if it's 1963, or pizza if it's 2016, or the 17th letter of the alphabet. In this guy's case, he didn't like 5G. So they seem to have a magical way of tying these lone nuts to whatever their so-called conspiracy theory du jour is. They solve these kind of cases in like an hour and a half. If it comes to investigating Hunter Biden's laptop, that takes 4 months, and then they decide there's nothing on it. What is going on with the FBI, Larry?
Well, ask yourself one basic question. I'd like to ask these questions to our viewers. Since the NSA has all of our emails, all of our text, all of our telephone conversations, and they keep them for at least 5 years, why is it that not one Hillary Clinton email came out through the NSA? Okay, they have all the evidence. The government has all the evidence. It's covered up. And, it also covers up their possible involvement in these things, which, we know happens. And that's why I want you to read my book, because one of the first chapters is about the executive branch, going all the way back to John Kennedy, because I was a young boy at the time, probably killed by the CIA because they thought he was soft on Castro or on communism or whatever, going through all of these different situations where our government has actually been involved in crimes and covered it up to protect themselves. And then, of course, you have, the legislative branch, which are just a bunch of fools, criminals, and court jesters. And we can see that with this latest COVID-19 bailout. What respect can you have for these people on Capitol Hill? Aren't you tired of seeing them on Fox News telling you that they're going to do X, Y, Z, and then they do nothing other than raise money for themselves? It's disgusting. And then, of course, you have the federal judges, who are the worst of all, because they're put there to protect us, but they become whores. They're the vassals of the people that got them their jobs through political campaign contributions. Large corporations, large labor unions, large special interests of all variety. And this is what you got on the bench, bought and paid for yes men and women. Just like the yes men and women, there were no women at the time, under King George III, which caused us to create a new nation because our founding fathers tried to reason with the king. And they said, we don't want to break away from you. We are British, okay? We respect it. We love being British, but you can't treat us this way. You can't take our legal system away from us. You can't overtax us. You can't take our guns away from us and leave us defenseless. And finally, they just had it. And they said, look, we're willing to risk our lives to form a new nation and their fortune. And that's where we are today. And that's why I wrote this book. You know, people are saying sometimes, you know, in WorldNet Daily or other places, because I always mention, go get my book. There's like a couple people up there that are trolls, probably Roger Stone trolls or from the left or whatever trolls. You know, we just can't take it. Klayman's pushing his book. Yeah, I am pushing my book. I'll tell you why, because people need to understand. I want them to read it. I don't have the luxury of the clowns on Fox News promoting their own books every night. Everyone becomes a bestseller. Most of them don't even write the books. They have some flunky write it for them and they put their name on it. You know, I wrote this book myself and it comes from my heart. It comes from what I've experienced in 43 years of being a lawyer working in the swamp, or shall we say cesspool of Washington, D.C. And, you know, I walk around, Jason, I'll tell you, lately, I'm just angry. I'm just really angry because I got this really bad feeling that this country is going down unless we rise up very, very quickly. It's never been at this state. Conservatives, you know, have always, you know, to some extent seen doom. But now we really are at the forefront. We're right at the doorstep of doom. And you better think about it clearly. If you think watching Sean Hannity is enough and being entertained, then you ought to go to another country. You know, and it was Ronald Reagan who said, when freedom dies here, there's no other place to go. So you can forget about going to another country as well.
Yeah. And actually, you know, Larry, Eric brings up a good point that the Audible version of the book is a great way for people to listen to it while they cook or do their work around the house. The other thing that I want to point out is that if people aren't yet signed up for Audible, you can get a free credit when you join. So you could actually get Larry's book for free and listen to it and hear all the great information in there. You just mentioned Ronald Reagan, and it brings me back to another story that I was pretty shocked to see kind of come out of the blue last week. As part of his swan song, taking his final dive, the criminal Iran-Contra cover-upper, William Barr, he's reopened the 32-year-old investigation into Pan Am 103. Now, Ronald Reagan, I think, was still president when this occurred, and he was super anti-Gaddafi and anti-Libya. But I followed this kind of closely. I remember it happening when I was kind of, you know, just a kid in high school, and a lot of students from Syracuse University were killed. This really touched me mentally because I'd taken that flight from Heathrow to New York, and this was a terrible tragedy. It's interesting that William Barr would choose to reopen this investigation and not something like 9/11. Do you have any thoughts on this, Larry?
No, I mean, William Barr is the master of appearing to do something when he's not doing something. So, hey, he wanted to do something before he left, and that was it. After he threw the president under the bus and said there was no massive fraud, after he failed to indict and try one of the criminals in the whole Russian collusion witch hunt. This is what he does. I mean, and he is part of that Washington establishment swamp. He's part of that Republican cabal that protects itself at the expense of the American people. You know, the Republicans are not as evil as the Democrats. They're just simply worthless, incompetent, and cowardly. And he's the biggest coward of all, short of Jeff Sessions, who frankly wasn't smart enough to even know where he was most of the time. This guy's smart. He knew what he was doing. Yeah. And he subverted the Constitution. He subverted the rule of law. He's one of the worst attorney generals, I think, in my lifetime.
I agree with you completely in that regard. I would add one slight modifier to what you're saying. He is the expert at making it look like he's doing something when he's actually doing something else. I don't think that he opened this investigation into Pan Am 103 for no reason at all. I think he's furthering some of the propaganda and disinformation that was critical in 1988 as far as distracting people from Iran-Contra and getting them to focus on a false narrative blaming Libya. It's interesting to note that there's a lot going on in Libya now that we're not hearing about in the mainstream news. Turkey's Erdogan is taking a really aggressive posture over there. I'm going to be speaking in just about an hour and a half to Jimmy and Joanne Moriarty about details on that. I don't mean to draw you into a conversation that you're not up to speed on, but we still have some more time, Larry. I know there were other things that you wanted to discuss. What else is on your mind today?
Well, there are a lot of things that are on my mind. I think, Jason, we also have to look at another issue with regard to this country today. You know, one of the things that I always take note of, do you ever listen to today's music? I mean, can you imagine, compare today's music, so-called music, to music of the 1960s, 70s, or 80s, or after World War II. And you listen to this stuff, and you realize, you know, this rap crap, you know, that's on, and other things, frankly. It's not music. I'm sorry. I don't mean that in a racial sense, because there are whites that are doing rap too, okay? But it tells you the degeneration of society, you know, where we're going. I mean, there are a couple good musicians these days. I think, you know, Lady Gaga is good, you know, and there are a few others.
She's a spirit cooker, Larry.
Well, her politics may be bad. They are, obviously, but she's very talented. But they're not even talented anymore. And it tells you that part of the problem is not just these corrupt people in government, but it's our own culture. It's the dumbing down of our culture. It's what's being taught in our schools and our universities and every place else. And look, I'm sitting in front of an Indian rug right now. My use of the word Indian is considered racist, okay? The Cleveland Indians, this mistake on the lake, the city in second place is the biggest dump in the United States after Detroit, okay? Just abolished the use of the Indians in the Cleveland Indians name. I mean, can you give me a break? I mean, that's considered racist that you use the word Indian. I think that's a tribute to Indians, that, you know, they're fighters, okay? So this is where we are today. And it's to the point where we not just have to retake control and create our own government by and for the people, but we need to start educating. And that's why I wrote the book. And that's why I write a column every week at WND.com. That's why I used to write one on Newsmax, but they censored me 80% of the time. They're not really conservative or frankly religious. That's a joke. You know, we have to get out there through people like you and others and educate the American people. But the first thing we need to convince them of is that our government is totally corrupt, is that we don't have a government. And the left and right, as I've said many times, the one thing we can agree on is that nothing we hear from the government is true anymore. And that's the reality. So now we have to form a new government. And I'm not saying create a violent revolution. Suppose we said, okay, we're going to have a Continental Congress in Philadelphia or some other place, and we're going to nominate a president. We're going to nominate Supreme Court justices. We're going to hold elections for who should be in the Congress. And we have a right to do that. Our Declaration of Independence says we have a right to do that. And if you don't like it, come and get us. And we've got a Second Amendment right. So we're not going to start a fight, but we don't recognize you as our government anymore. Sorry, you're not our government. And that shows you just in the last few days with this COVID-19 relief bill, which is a total sham. They don't represent us.
Well, Larry, the president's been talking a lot about calling people to, you know, his supporters to what he is saying is going to be an unprecedented rally in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. What do you anticipate will be going on there?
I don't know. I mean, there'll probably be a lot of people, but what I think we ought to do, frankly, is have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, come to Washington, D.C., surround the White House and tell the president, we're protecting you and do not leave until we have new free and fair elections. I think this is the way to go. And, you know, people are saying, well, maybe the military or the police, you know, might fire on the people. No, we had an experience with that, and that was with the Chi-Coms as well in China, where they killed 10,000 people. That's not going to happen in this country. They don't have these people would side with the people, the military and the police at that point. I don't believe that any violence would occur. But I would say, hey, President, stay where you are. We'll protect you. And we'll surround the White House. They want to come and get you, they got to get us first. But we want free and fair elections. And in the meantime, freeze everything, declare martial law.
Do you see anything that the president could or possibly will do? I mean, it doesn't seem likely. I personally don't want martial law. That sounds like a good way for the military to come in here with a gun and take me out of this apartment and do whatever they want. Do we have any other legal
No, I'm not
actions?
suggesting that. I'm not suggesting martial law. I mean, the word is extreme. But I'm not talking about taking control of people, having tanks running through the streets. What I'm saying is declare that I am president until we have another election, a free and fair election without the fraud. And then ensure, use the military, use the police to set up that free and fair election. And let the Democrats verify it on something they were not willing to let the Republicans do during the last election. And in a defensive posture, is that this is the way it's going to be. Come and get us. Sorry, we're not going to start a fight with you. Do you choose to start a fight with us? And if you do, there are millions of people there. Millions.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly hopeful that there is no
violence. Does
violence.
that sound far-fetched? It may sound far-fetched, but you know what? We are at that point. What is the choice? The choice is not currently at the ballot box because everything is cooked. Everything is corrupt. What point are we at? We don't have a country. If you have a kid or you have a grandkid, they're going to be living in a hellhole.
They are right now.
I don't think this country is going to last much longer at all unless we wage a peaceful, nonviolent revolution. If they want to start it with us, okay. Ours is peaceful. We're not going to start it. And that's, I'm the only one that's saying this. And, let's be real here. We can go back to Congress. We can go back to the courts. We can go back to the executive branch. Frankly, all three of them aren't worth it. S-H-I-T. Excuse the French. They don't represent the American people. They represent themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that people know that they can visit freedomwatchusa.org. They can find out about the book there. And also anybody who makes a tax-deductible donation to Freedom Watch of $50 or more, you get the book for free. So it's a good way to check out the book and keep Freedom Watch going. They're really engaging in legal actions that nobody else is. People can also access Larry's podcasts on the website and learn more about the various cases. So Larry, let's take it back to this lawsuit against China. It's interesting that you're getting more traction in foreign countries than you are here in the United States. What's happening with that, and what do you expect to happen next?
Well, this is interesting. We filed a case in Dallas, and we served or attempted to serve the Chinese through valid legal means, through first Federal Express, then DHL. They go to the ministry that's involved, to the Wuhan lab and to the various government agencies, and then they refuse to accept the package. Okay, not just an insult to the American legal system, but flouting the American legal system. So I went back to the federal judge in Dallas and I said, give us an alternative means to serve. And he wouldn't. I said, we can serve by Twitter, we can serve by all kinds of means. He wouldn't. So now we're having to go through the State Department. That's very, very costly. People want to contribute to that. We're going to do it. It'll take another few months, but it'll get done. Now, the real test is going to be once they're served. They won't enter into the case. They'll do what Iran did. We sued Iran for the victims, the families of Extortion 17. They'll default on that because they don't respect our legal system.
What happened when they defaulted?
Well, then we get a judgment. Then we're going to seek to collect on the monies that are in this country. That's what we're going to do.
So that's not so bad. What happened with that Iran default? I mean, when will you be able to
Well, we've been trying to serve Hamid Karzai for years. I mean, he is one of the major criminals in world history, and we didn't. So we're just going to proceed against Iran at this point, and that case is going forward. Finally, we've got this corrupt judge, Colleen Kohler-Catelli, that dragged her heels, but she's going to have to move it right now. I write about her in my book. It takes a revolution, forget the scandal industry. She's number one on the Judicial Hall of Shame, but it is going forward. And Iran, as you might remember, paid bounties, $5,000 for each dead serviceman $10,000 for each Humvee that was destroyed in the Afghan war. And Iran does have assets still that we can potentially reach. So we're doing that for the families, for the Gold Star families. And it's taken a long time. These cases take a long time.
Right.
And that's the reality. And it would be so much faster if Trump ordered his Justice Department under this flunky Rosen, who's now running it, to intervene, at least for the next month, and tell the judge to move his derriere in this case because it's a national emergency. But the president can also freeze Chinese assets. He has that power. What are the Chinese going to do? Launch a nuclear attack on us? We're still more powerful than they are. They're not going to do that. And that would be very, very unwise on their part. I don't know why the president seems to have lost his nerve with regard to China. It's not enough to say the Wuhan or the Kung flu. It's not enough to say I put on a few trade sanctions. Our country is being destroyed by these communist Chinese, not the Chinese people. 30% of the people that signed up for class action, you can see it on our website at freedomwatchusa.org, are Chinese Americans or Asian Americans. They're very patriotic people. They left China because they didn't want to live under a dictatorship. They've got more courage than the president of the United States in this regard.
What do we know, Larry, about this new federal state of China? I met some of their advocates in Washington, D.C. when I was there for this, that previous Trump rally. Do you know anything about that?
What's that again, Jason? I missed it.
The new federal state of China. It's some kind of political movement that Steve Bannon and this billionaire from China are behind. It's
Steve
a political
Bannon's
movement.
Involved. Yeah. If Steve Bannon's involved, I wouldn't pay any attention, frankly.
All right. Fair enough. Now,
he's got his own problems right now with allegedly building a border wall for, and misusing the money. That's the allegation. So he's got his own problems on that.
Right. This is what I wanted to ask you. So had you ever interacted with Peter Smith in any of your stuff dealing with the Clintons or?
I never did, no. I may have, but I don't remember.
But you were aware of him, right? He created the fund for the Arkansas State Troopers during Troopergate?
Yeah, I knew of that. I was not involved in the Arkansas stuff. That's probably one of the few things that I wasn't involved in at the time.
There's a dust-up between me and Ben Wittes, who is a legal journalist over there at the Brookings Institute. They have this thing called the Lawfare blog, and I've got evidence that really strongly suggests that Peter Smith was killed, that he didn't commit suicide. And this guy's been so resistant to viewing the evidence that it causes me to wonder who would do that other than someone who's deliberately trying to cover up the evidence. And he got really upset. If you don't know anything about the case.
No, I don't. But I don't know. But however, where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, 80 people disappeared during the Clinton administration, material witnesses. I mean, I think that Hillary and Bill had Epstein hit. I really do. Probably used the mafia to do it. People have other theories, but that's my theory. These people are they're heartless individuals. They're killers, essentially. That's what they are.
I don't know if you saw this today, but it was very surprising that the New York Daily News came out. We were talking about Epstein. They introduced this character. They're saying that the last man to share a jail cell with Jeffrey Epstein died last month of COVID. But this is not Tartaglione, the super muscle-bound ex-cop who people speculated choked out dead Ep, if he's dead at all. This is Efren Reyes. He's pictured here, died November 27th, 2019. I don't know why they're telling us about that. Also, I don't know, did we even have COVID-19 in November or, in August? Wait a minute, it says he died November 27th. In August 2019, he shared the cell. So he just died this year, but we never heard about this guy before. Seems like a real distraction. Weird, right?
No, it's weird. And, we were talking before about how Barr and covering things up. Where's any information about Epstein?
Right.
Nothing. Zero, right? Justice Department investigation. Another dive by Blowhard Bill.
And
Unbelievable.
got Ghislaine Maxwell. She's in jail. Her bid for a nearly $30 million bail arrangement was rejected today. Have you ever heard of another situation, Larry, where somebody's incarcerated and they offer $30 million in bail? That's basically saying, hey, I'm rich, let me out of jail.
Well, they want to keep control of her. She'll probably turn up dead too at some point.
I'm surprised we haven't seen any photographs of her getting arrested or being in jail. It seems weird, right? I mean, there's all kinds of prison guards and things who must be being offered money to snap a cell phone picture of her in an orange uniform, but nothing.
Epstein was the ultimate pimp, okay? The ultimate pimp for Democrats and Republicans, elite people. And, you know, this scandal goes far and wide. So both political parties and the powers to be in Washington, D.C. and throughout the states have an interest in working together to keep it quiet and to keep it covered up. And they had an interest in seeing Epstein dead as well. The only question is who did it? Murder on the Epstein Express.
Did you see that press conference where Alexander Acosta answered a question and he said that he had been instructed to keep his hands off of Epstein because he was intelligence? I remember seeing that press conference and now I can't find it. And Dershowitz tells me I'm lying.
Well, I suspect that Dershowitz doesn't know. Look, Dershowitz is a media whore, okay? He just wants to hear himself talk. He just has to get on TV, and he'll say anything to get himself on TV. So, you know, that's just the way Dershowitz is.
I think beyond that,
he had a miraculous conversion to Fox News when he could get his face on Fox News.
Well, and he's writing for Newsmax as well, so he does seem to be playing both sides against the middle, saying whatever it is that suits him and whoever it is that he's defending. Larry, we're just about out of time here. Was there anything else that you wanted to discuss today?
Well, just that I do, and I'm not pushing my book. I want people to read it, digest it. Tell me what you think. Send me an email at leklayman@gmail.com, leklayman@gmail.com. If you've got better ideas, let me know. We're in it together. As Ben Franklin said, either we hang together or separately we'll hang. And we're about ready to hang. With Biden and Harris coming in, we're about ready to hang. And if you don't think so, you live in another solar system, not even another planet. So that's my message for today. And, you know, wake up, snap out of it. The country is almost over. And we have to pull it out of the fire. We'll have to pull the chestnuts out of the fire. I want you to read this book. And I want you to do something constructive other than watching cable news, and let us fight legally and ethically to save the country. Because if we don't, there are plenty of people out there now, when Biden and Harris come for the guns, which they're going to do, either with high taxes or just confiscating them, all hell's going to break loose. And we don't want to see that.
Yeah. Well, Larry, thanks for joining me today. It is always good to get your insights. It's always interesting for me to see the comments of who agrees and who disagrees. You're definitely one of the most polarizing guests on Crowdsource the Truth, but I appreciate having you on. And if I don't see you, Larry, before the new year, I hope that 2021 is better for all of us. The best to you and your family and to all of our viewers. I want to thank all of the generous sponsors that make Crowdsource the Truth possible. People can sponsor the show by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And people can sponsor the efforts at Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org. Larry, I will see you in the new year. Take care of yourself, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, Jason. God bless you.
And thanks, everybody, for watching. Don't miss Jimmy and Joanne coming up.